Welcome to another episode of the Fascia Masters podcast. Today we're going to be talking about the ketogenic diet, which is in a response to a comment on our podcast, and how doing a diet, whether it's keto or anything where there's rapid weight loss, how this can reveal more adhesions or wrinkles or saggy skin, and what we can do to help plump that back up and bring it back to life. So first of all, we know that the ketogenic diet is primarily fats. It's about 70 to 80% fats in your diet, which is huge for a caloric intake. And then second on the list is the protein, and then third is carbs. And you're not really eating carbs necessarily. You are, but they're primarily coming from vegetables and some fruits, maybe some berries. But again, if you eat too much of that, then that can kind of break the whole chain of being in ketosis. So I'm just going to pull this up because it was a very long question that was asked. And we're just going to kind of go through this one step at a time because there's a lot of great questions, a lot of great comments in here that we can address right now on this podcast. So the first thing is that being or switching to a rapid different diet, it was interesting how fast she lost weight, but also that her pain was gone as soon as she cut out grains and sugars. So that's really interesting. Now, just from a pain perspective, before we move on, why do you think that's the case? Because we talk so much about pain and how to release the fascia and the adhesions that build up in the fascia to promote flow, to take tension off of the body. But from not changing exercise, not doing any massage or treatments or block therapy or anything, why, or from your perspective, why is that the case?
So from my perspective on this, because of course we all have different body types and we all break down food differently. So if I were on largely a meat diet, that would not bode well for my body personally. I do well with carbohydrates. I eat high fat, but I also primarily eat carbohydrates. I don't eat much animal protein anyway, with the exception of butter, which I've heard is it a fat or is it dairy? I mean, there's interesting comments around that, but nonetheless, if she is struggling because of the grain and sugar, to me, that's an indicator of a metabolic disorder. So we had a podcast recently talking about metabolic disorders and type 2 diabetes and all of that stuff. And the thing is, the pancreas rests just below the diaphragm. So if we're not breathing properly and we're collapsing into the core space, then we don't have that ability to regulate sugars well or to keep the body properly heated. So one of the things with diabetes, for example, is and again, this is my perspective on what's going on in the blood when we have issues, when we have high glucose in our blood. Mm-hmm. So just like with fats, when they're melted, they become liquid and they solid when they're colder. Sugars also need to be melted to be liquid. So if our overall body temperature is colder, those sugars form crystals in the blood, and those crystals have sharp edges. So also, if we aren't breathing diaphragmatically and properly, we have a narrowing of space in the blood vessels themselves. So now imagine you've got all these little tiny knives traveling through these blood vessels, and then they're causing damage and inflammation to the blood vessels. So that in itself is going to cause pain.
That makes the most sense right there.
Okay.
It's causing the inflammation. So the cutting is almost like a very minuscule injury, which is sending these signals to your body that, hey, you got to start repairing this. So now it's sending this inflammation, and you keep up with a diet that's high in carbohydrates, high in sugars. And these could be refined sugars or really any sugars. Yeah. But your body is now sending that inflammation because it's told to repair it. And if you don't treat that injury or that inflammation properly, then it can become stagnant and create pain in the body.
Yes. So here she goes and she takes out what is causing all of that inflammation. So now she has no pain. And also the inflammation, if it's constantly chronically being sent, that's going to add size and plump up the tissue because it's just more of something in that space. So now we take out that irritant. The body doesn't have to continue inflaming. And so now she has a reduction in pain.
Okay. So that's really interesting perspective. And we're not going to be talking primarily about pain in this episode, but I'm going to carry on with another note I made based off of her comment. So after about a year into the keto diet, collagen in her left cheek, right under the cheekbone, started to disappear and developed a deep wrinkle valley in the left cheek, but her right cheek looks normal. So this is super interesting. I now have wrinkles all over my face. I never used to have wrinkles when I was at my unhealthiest and eating mostly just grains and sugars. So there's something going on when a person starts the keto diet and feels so much better and more pain-free. But what's going on with the collagen and the flow?
So the collagen hasn't changed necessarily. I mean, the patterning of how the collagen is going to grip and adhere onto bone and structures around it is based on posture, because gravity is constantly causing things to migrate. So we have this opportunity in our body to understand proper postural foundations and to keep our cells where they are, and then to keep them properly fed and clean with our conscious breath. So if that's the case, if all of us, let's just call the perfect human, which none of us are, where we're always, supporting proper cell alignment and having that breath going, those cells get to stay youthful and plump like that fully blown up balloon that defies gravity and glows. Take half that air out of that balloon, and now that balloon becomes wrinkly and it attracts dirt and debris. So essentially what's happening to the population in general is, as we age and we're not conscious of posture and breathing lifelong, we start to deflate. So when we're inflamed, though, inflammation, just like your belly, if it's bloated, it's big. So when it comes to the face, that can give you that more youthful appearance because it's plumper. But it's not plump in the healthy way.
Right.
It's plump in the inflamed way.
Yeah.
So you may sense that you look younger, but again, is it a healthy younger or whatever? So now we've had this change. And the thing is, with the face, we've got all these wonderful landscapes to create, the faces that we have and the differences in how people look and appear. So if we keep our head properly aligned and we chew properly on both sides, so there's balance to what's going on in the face from a structural and muscle perspective, then we continue to look symmetrical. And if we're breathing properly, we continue to keep those cells plumped up. But the reality is, we fall into these patterns of alignment based on what side are we dominant on and what do we do, and so on and so on. So if I'm always sitting with my head tilted over to the right, then gravity is going to be creating a different pathway for where the adhesions will grip and adhere based on that. So if my head is always this way, chances are I'm going to have more of a jowl on that right side. And then there's going to be more of a falling. And then this side of the face is going to have a different appearance.
Right. So then the left cheek there becomes more hollow.
Right.
And then that's where if it's getting pulled to the right, you could see more wrinkles because it's getting pulled to that right side.
Yeah.
And that's what's causing the appearance. And I find it fascinating because she mentioned no exercise and not really much movement, more of a sedentary lifestyle, working in desk jobs since 2019, and we're in 2024. So that's quite a long time, but still lost the weight. And that's really cool. But the key point here is that there is no movement, really, no exercise, no fascia release. You're not moving this fluid matrix in your body around to help release adhesions and keep your cells, your muscles, your fascia healthy and strong. So what it's doing is, back to kind of the title of this podcast, that rapid weight loss is starting to now reveal what's actually going on under this layer of inflammation, or if you want to call it fat, or whatever term really works for you. But that is fascinating to me.
And I like the term bloating because, we tend to think of bloating just like in the belly, but really, if your legs are inflamed, they're bloated. If your face is inflamed, it's bloated. Like, everything is just bloated.
Well,
so it's toxic.
Totally. And I can have more of I'll call it a cheat meal, where it's not part of my typical food caliber. And then I wake up the next day, my eyes are puffy, my cheeks feel like they've gained like a pound of water. Like, it's just holding on to it. So
I remember this just reminds me of a funny moment. This was in the beginning of this whole journey, and I had a photo shoot the next day. And so I happened to go out for a dinner to Joey's restaurant the night before. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, I'm going to eat, the healthiest thing on the menu. So I go and I order the lettuce wraps. I'm eating chicken back then. So I'm eating the lettuce wraps, and this is my meal. And I wake up the next day and I had to cancel my photo shoot. Because
hidden MSG,
my eyes and like everything, it was like, I don't even look like me right now. Yeah. So, just to be like, obviously that wasn't the healthiest thing, right? I mean, not for me, because I actually have quite the sensitivity to the MSG, which didn't even clue into my head back then that this is what's going on. I'm just like, I'm going to eat lettuce wraps. How healthy for me. Wrong.
Right. So back to the idea of now underneath that layer of inflammation, we're now seeing what was truly there.
Yeah.
So could this be caused from also a lack of hydration? So maybe in a chronically state of being dehydrated, which can just make the cells feel more deflated. Also lack of oxygen, not enough flow. Like I see it so clearly because when you're just stagnant, you're not doing much, but you're following a really healthy diet. That's a massive check mark that you're doing if you're ridding this chronic inflammation from your body and excess fat that's stored in the body. But there's still something more underneath those layers. So it's kind of like diving in with the block and how it drives through the layers, but we did this from a different perspective where now you shed this off. Now you see these wrinkles, but I wonder if she started to, or if anybody, I don't want to isolate a singular person, creates more movement, or does some of the techniques in the face, does the block in the face starts activating the diaphragm, that the appearance with not just within the face, but the entire body will start to change.
Well, and absolutely, because dehydrated fascia is really fascia that's frozen. Think about the amount, ice is smaller than water. Like you put, something like ice cubes in a tray and it's full to the top and then they become ice and they're smaller than how much water you put in. So things that are frozen are dehydrated. It's lacking flow. So anywhere where there's multiple adhesions in an area causing that lack of flow, you're going to see, because too, as the adhesions grip to bone, they become tighter. So there's that compression. But now there's all of this other area that's ballooning. And depending on how much inflammation will depend on how much we balloon. So for the person that doesn't have a lot of inflammation in their body, they'll still have adhesion if you're not conscious of posture and breath. But they might not have a big ballooned belly.
Right.
Where you've got a lot of inflammation. As soon as you create a little bit of compression, you're going to have a lot of that ballooning aspect. So you might feel that you've got this big belly or big inner thighs or triceps, sort of all these areas where there's this potential for the ballooning to occur, which when we don't have correct alignment, it occurs anywhere and everywhere in the body. You can even have ballooning in and around your ankle.
Yeah.
Because of how everything compresses those adhesions as they're trying to stop that foot from, falling outside of your normal gait pattern.
Right. So she also mentioned that lost a lot of weight, feeling a lot better from a pain perspective, but also now notice that bit of that, it's a term, the pooch belly, and there's more fat located in that area. So what are your thoughts on how we can rid that? Because she's still not, from what I heard, no exercise, but the weight's dropping in other areas. Why is it still being stubborn in that area around the belly?
And that's because we don't have that strong foundation of the rib cage to support. There's a few answers to this question. So the movement of the diaphragm creates that heating and that ability for the body to remove the toxins. So even though she hasn't been creating as much inflammation because she's changed her diet, there's still toxins in the body that are trapped in the folds. Yeah. And if there's no movement in the abdominal muscles because she's breathing through the muscles of the upper chest, combine that with the lack of awareness of where her limbs are, her legs are, that's going to also be creating a compression in the pelvis, which is going to take away space there, causing a lower belly expansion, as well as causing the upper body to come forward and down. Now we've got this space through here.
And the collapsed rib cage causing the protruding in the belly. And it all starts to migrate, morph, adhere, inflame.
Yeah. So this whole space between the pelvis and the rib cage that, when properly aligned, allows, a flat belly and an hourglass figure if you're a woman, not so much if you're a man, just because of our Q angle.
Right.
But now there's way less space. So stuff's going to expand. And then not only that, even though, again, she's changed her diet, she still won't be supporting the breakdown and absorption of foods. She still won't be supporting cleaning the liver most effectively, because we need heat and energy in this area. And I do believe she also mentioned she had an issue with her thyroid.
Right.
Hyperthyroidism.
That's correct.
Hyper or hypo? I can't remember. And either way, in my opinion, it's kind of irrelevant, because when we have thyroid issues...
What's the difference actually between...
hyper means too active. Hypo means... Underactive, yeah. So, this butterfly-shaped gland through here. So first of all, like every organ, it needs flow. So if we have our tongue properly aligned and strong and everything aligned with the head, then this gland is getting, properly fed. But if we don't have that proper breath and we're collapsing, that in turn is going to be pulling the head forward, and we're going to be strangling this. And then as you're tilting your head one way or another chronically, that's going to be causing another compression. So there's a lot of stress in here.
Right.
A ton of stress in here. So,
and it makes total sense, because this reminded me of Brian Johnson, that like massive biohacker could be a term, but also just focusing on reversing his biological age, or at least slowing it down as much as he can. That was a big thing they noticed, is from his posture. He wasn't talking about his thyroid, but he was talking about his jugular veins and how they're so compressed. There's some disorder, whatever, that is called jugular something, but they were predicting like Alzheimer's, other major issues, how this can literally slow down the brain, make you less intelligent, just because you have less blood and oxygen flow to the brain. So anyways, point being is, I can totally see that from a physical collapse causing that issue directly to the thyroid.
For sure. And that's just it. Like we think it's from something so simple as posture, but that's like the most important thing, along with the breath.
Yeah.
And I could even back up and say posture is the most important thing, because without posture, we don't have breath. Without breath, we don't have life. So blood and oxygen getting to the brain is the most important thing. And I can't remember the name of this book. I read it a couple of years ago, but it was on anti-aging. And I actually had a quote from that book in my book that I wrote, Unblock Your Body. So what he was saying was, as we age, the frontal lobe that sits right in front of the forehead, this is the lobe of the brain for personality, for learning new skills, all of these things. And basically he was saying that as we get older, the frontal lobe shrinks. Well, why does it shrink? There's got to be a reason, right? And in my view, the reason that it shrinks is because we age in a forward direction. So now the entire brain is migrating forward and then left or right, depending again on how you specifically hold your head. So now if I'm always like looking down, which most people do, or even sleeping in this curled position, that is still causing that forward migration of the brain. Now this lobe is getting compressed. And so it's not getting proper blood and oxygen flow. Adhesions are going to be developing through this area. So if we don't allow that to happen, then does the frontal lobe need to shrink? In my opinion, absolutely not.
And remind me, so the frontal lobe, that's responsible for, you said, personality.
For learning new skills. There's a whole bunch of things.
So that there, I can see, in addition to a physical collapse in the migration of the head and the brain and how it can get more squished, but also as you age, you're probably less optimistic about learning new skills as well.
Yeah.
So you're not firing that up. So now when you combine these two things together, A, poor posture, and then B, not actively seeking to learning new things, and maybe you're just okay with kind of hanging out and just staying in your regime. Maybe you are retired and you don't want to learn new things. You're just very comfortable. That's where I can see the brain is starting to very slowly dim that light. And then eventually it can, I'm not going to say be turned off, but it's going to be very dim. And then it's just that cycle will continue.
Well, and what I found interesting in that book as well was that also mentioning that from an evolutionary standpoint, the reason that he said that it was shrinking was because it just wasn't necessary. And I'm thinking, well,
what wasn't necessary?
For older people, whatever that even meant, for aging people to have this brain portion be so active. And I'm thinking, well, that makes no sense because first of all, with time comes wisdom.
Totally.
So you want the older people to be super sharp because they have a lot to offer. Mm-hmm. So to think that from an evolutionary standpoint, the old people are useless. I mean, like, oh my gosh, like the wise person is the one giving the wisdom to the young people. And if we lose that, that's scary because I mean, just even think about practices of growing food. Mm-hmm. Like if like they knew how to farm, they knew how to have a garden. Mm-hmm. If we don't have those things passed down, how to cook even, then we're learning everything from, other mediums or whatever. And right. In my opinion, the wisdom needs to stick around and to be shared amongst the masses. So there's a huge need for the older people to have a really sharp brain.
Mm-hmm. And on that note, it's never too late to start anything new. No. Like, sure, there could be like some restrictions and whatever, but as a general statement, and I think that is a great statement. It can get people excited and give people hope that it's not too late to do anything. You want to start changing the way your face looks, or whatever.
Yeah, and let's talk about that a little more because we kind of skirted over that whole changing the face. So okay, so now we've found that we've got one sallow chic and there's more cheek, and there's more wrinkles throughout. So can we change this? Absolutely, we can change this.
And this is actually in part of the main question that she was asking, just so that I can say that I said it. But so how can those on keto support their lifestyle with fascia release and breathing? And will I ever get my cheek back and release that belly fat? So yes, let's continue with the cheek.
Now, I might get challenged on this statement because again, this is simply my perspective, mm-hmm. but there's a lot of talk about collagen. Mm-hmm. So that as we get older, the body creates less collagen. I actually believe it's less of that and more of the migration of collagen away from balance. Because again, if we are perfect in our alignment, we've got this beautiful balance of the collagen and elastin that make up the fascia. The fascia connects every single cell in the body. So when there's this balance, we have this effortless effort because every cell is vibrating at its highest capacity, getting properly fed and clean. There's no stress. And, here we are young and healthy and we look great. Now, as we get older, what happens? We start falling in, we start collapsing. So again, the collagen migrates because it's doing its job to keep us safe. Because if I'm tipping over, if I'm tipping over in a minute, the body responds in a minute. But if I'm slowly, continually getting pulled from my center, the collagen is going to be continually, slowly migrating to areas of need to create that support so that I don't tip over. So
then if there's a lack of collagen as we age, which people are mentioning, then it's migrating, sure. But as like a general statement, say like, what if somebody does have great posture and they're in their later years, like, and they ran a test, let's just say, and there's like, yes, there is less collagen in your body. I wonder what the reasoning behind that would be.
Well, I would say it's because they're not breathing properly.
What if they are? Like, what if...
I have yet to see somebody from at any age that has a perfectly aligned body with a full capacity for full breath. Because that's not how we live. We are asymmetrical. We are, and because we don't feel gravity, it's not like gravity hurts. If gravity hurt, we probably would approach gravity very differently, right? But we don't even know it's happening to us. It just is simply there. And because we are so adaptable in our bodies, we are constantly shifting and migrating. And even if you're very physically fit and aware of your body, there's emotional affronts that will cause me to shift my breath. I mean, we are these living dynamic containers that are constantly off-putting the stresses of life. And we're also all absorbing stuff, right? We're constantly absorbing toxins in food, air, everywhere. So I don't think anybody is breathing perfectly and properly. So we're all getting compressed in the diaphragm. We all don't have that perfect ability to feed every one of our cells. And as time goes on, we have more gravity accumulating and adding up. So because now here we are at whatever age you're starting this understanding, this work. Now we take this body that has collagen that has migrated from balance, and we can work and release it from where it was, breathe life into it, and then pull it back through understanding posture. And that's why we talk so much about posture, because we don't want to just release and feed an area. We don't want to, or we want to also understand what caused that area to have the collagen migrate in the first place, which is posture, which is how we move all the time. So yeah, I actually fully believe that in a perfect world where this body is perfect going through time, that we really shouldn't go through aging. Because if we can keep everything as it should be, then compression doesn't add up. Because compression is what creates pain, aging, dis-ease, and ultimately death.
Well, and it's interesting because as we were talking earlier in this episode, the idea of, let's say you eat a really high refined sugar, carbohydrate, let's even throw in unhealthy dairies, gluten, etc.
Yeah.
Now, let's say that you have, I'm just going to use the term perfectly aligned body, perfect flow. The body should be able to, with its innate intelligence, detoxify and then also use that fuel to some sort of energy, but also combining the breath. Like, because if you're perfect, then your breathing's going to be optimized. It's going to be quote unquote perfect. Then I can see how, I'm not going to say like, maybe there's still like over a long period of time that, it could maybe cause some issues but again, then I'm going back on that idea, because if you are perfect and you're perfectly aligned, your diaphragm's working the way it should. It's massaging the abdominal organs. The heart and the lungs the lungs can expand fully. They can contract fully. You have perfect flow. You're going to detoxify everything so quickly, so fast, because that flow is there. So I guess the point...
So theoretically what you're saying is we could eat anything if we're perfect and we can deal with it and use what is coming in as fuel and release.
I'm saying like from...
And I agree.
From just a perspective of me just speaking off the top of my head, I wonder if that would be the case. Like, of course, we could never know or find that out because nobody is perfect, but that's really interesting.
So this is where body typing comes into play. So years ago when I had my clinic, I was working with an herbalist, and she gave me a book, How to Eat for Your Body Type, different than your blood type, although there's a lot of similarities. And so what I learned, and this is very superficial, for women, there's 4 body types. For men, there's 3. So there's the adrenal, the pituitary, the thyroid, and then for women, the gonadal. So, and this speaks to me about the signature posture that we're born into, because why, and I had an adrenal body type. So the adrenal body type, and I'm just referring to women here, is more that workhorse kind of body. Mm-hmm. The pituitary is more that pear-shaped body. The gonadal body type is more storing more of your size and shape in your lower half. Mm-hmm. And then the thyroid body type is more that ballerina body. Flat-chested, long limbs, thin. So people are a combination, but there's going to be one that's going to be more focus.
Right.
So then men have all 3 except the gonadal. So the way I see this is, why do some of us have certain body types and some different body types? And that's going to be based on the breath that we're born into. And that's why it's passed down
genetics.
To me, that's what genetics are. It's the breath that we're born into. So Because again, we're born with our mother's breath. And then from there, life afflicts us. And then we start moving off into our different directions based on different experiences that we have.
And it doesn't mean because, let's say, sure, you have a certain gene expression that's saying that this is more of your body type, or also your breath that determines that. You can always change that.
Yeah.
I think that's another thing that people need to understand, and not think that, oh, this is my fate. I'm just stuck in this body, and this is how it is. This is me. This is who I am. And that's great. But if you're wanting to change for whatever reason that is, that's available to you.
Well, for sure it is. Because if you have, as a woman, a gonadal body type, you're going to have less flow in your bottom half. And to me, it's all dependent on where the breath is strangled and what areas of your body aren't being properly fed and cleaned.
Yeah, because I am the son of my two parents, I don't know what their body types would necessarily be, but it doesn't mean that I'm going to have 100% either one of their body types or a combination, correct?
You're going to be born with your mother's breath. So yeah, genetics are a whole different subject that,
we don't have to go down that rabbit hole right now.
Yeah, for sure. But the reality is yes, you're born with your mother's breath. So, the thing is too, like you can see twins, right? And they can both age different ways. They both might have brown hair, brown eyes, but one person, this is their life and they look this way. The other person, this is their life. They look very, very different, based on life and experiences. So, but yes, I fully agree that we can change what's going on, because if you have been born into a family where bunions are really common, people think that, oh, I have bunions in my family. We can see structurally why bunions are created, and we can change that.
Right.
But we need to make changes to our patterning. So it's not simple to just say, if you've got bunions, start walking with your feet straight. That's going to help. But there's a whole bunch of adhesions that have locked you in those mechanical movements that are going to be creating those patterns of shifts and changes.
Right. So kind of going back to this, how can those on keto support their lifestyle with fascia release and breathing? So I know I asked that earlier, but...
So it's what we share. It's releasing the adhesions from where they're locked and holding us in negative alignment through the process of what we do. And if it's, you're doing block therapy, it's lying on the tool, taking the time to move through those layers of adhesions to create energy, heat, space. So now blood and oxygen can get into that space. Now there's energy, but then it's also through shifting the patterning of how you have been moving. Because if I keep walking like a duck with my feet externally rotated and I have bunions, those bunions are going to keep developing. If I change the patterning and then become aware of how I'm walking and I start walking in proper alignment, there's not going to be a need, because now I'm taking away that weak spot where that collagen and the inflammation and all of those things are migrating to, because there won't need to be a support. Even just like sitting on a chair, right? Like if you're sitting and you feel both sit bones equally on the chair, now we've created symmetry for the legs as well as the torso. We can still twist over, but the thing is if I'm sitting all the time over to the left or over to the right, then there's going to be that migration, and then that's going to impair movement, blood flow. Again, that's going to create compression and ballooning. Things are going to get stagnant, and then we're going to get, toxins stuck in areas. And then that can look like a cellulite if it's in your legs,
right?
Or varicose veins if we've basically shut off a roadway and now we've got veins protruding because, one instead of three channels of movement are only accessible. So that's the thing. Like, I love talking about fascia because I know that often we can sound redundant because the answers are always the same, but that's the fun part, because you can take any medical condition and you can break it down to blockages to flow are creating the problem.
Yeah.
And when you see the body in that light, and it's like, wow, okay, so I've been diagnosed with this, but if this is all that it is, then this is what I have to do. As opposed to, holy smokes, I've been given this scary name of something and my body's not working properly and there's not a lot of hope Because in a lot of scenarios, when you've been also diagnosed with something, they don't actually have a solution, because the solution is to melt the scar tissue to improve the flow. So when you look at the body with its parts and you're like, okay, this part over here isn't working, so let's try to give that organ or that tissue or whatever it is that's not working, let's add it. Like the pancreas, let's give the body insulin as opposed to supporting the body's ability to produce insulin properly, because everything is tied together. So again, when you try to address one part, you're potentially, if you get a relief, masking and then not getting to the root cause. So again, it's like, that Advil. If you've got sore knees and they're inflamed and you take an Advil to go for your run, you're doing more damage, because that pain is a message. It's telling you need to do something.
Very common with golf, by the way.
Yeah.
A lot of people are in pain when they're golfing, and golfing, anybody can golf, but I would say, especially at the course I'm a member at, it's not primarily teenagers or those in their 20s. Now, there's still obviously a group of us, but they could be more later years. And now they've accumulated pain, but now they're swinging in a singular direction all the time. Now their back hurts, their shoulder hurts, their feet hurt from walking, their knees hurt, all these things. So they're taking Advil so that they can at least play a sport that they want.
Yeah.
But now, as you mentioned, that's just masking the pain for a short time period so that you can get through that round. And then after that wears off, well, you didn't listen to your body necessarily, you didn't take the hints and the clues. And now it's starting to cause more irritation, which is going to send more inflammation, which is going to cause more pain, and then develop more adhesions and etc. So going back to what you were mentioning about, and what we were talking about is optimal flow, and if you are on like a keto diet, and how can you support this? But just as a blanket statement to anything, because we were even talking about like if you're taking certain medications or insulin, or even if you're just trying to detoxify through certain supplementation, through hydrogen, water, hydrogen gas, or if you're taking medication, whatever whatever you're taking for an intention to either improve, detoxify, or treat an ailment, if you're blocked, it's still not going to be able to do its work nearly as effectively compared to if you were open. Because we're not saying we're 100% against like pharmaceuticals. There's a time and a place for that.
Yep.
And if you can get off of that over a time period and your doctor gives you the thumbs up, that's amazing. But the whole point is, whatever you're taking to help improve something in your body, if you have more flow, that medicine, and I'm just grouping all of this from foods to supplements to pharmaceutical, that will more effectively be delivered to the cells and to the destination where it needs to be to help improve that issue or whatever you're trying to accomplish. So regardless of anything, improve flow, and there's going to be a benefit. Like there's no downside to it. There is zero downside to it. And if you can, of course, in the combination of that, improve the breath, it is extremely important knowing how to exhale fully, because people don't. We talk about how people just take a big breath in, but then they go, and they're building up too much oxygen and not enough carbon dioxide in the blood to actually allow the oxygen to absorb into the cells. But it's so crucial and critical to exhale fully just to detoxify.
So here's a visual, and I'm going to go from one extreme to another just to give people like a really simple understanding of flow in general. So let's say you live in a city. I mean, we live in a city of almost 900,000 people now. So whatever the size of your city, it's a city. So there's a lot of traffic. So now in Winnipeg here, let's call it's winter. So let's pretend your car is your cell and you want to go from one place to another. So first of all, oxygen is the gasoline. So if you don't have enough gas for your car, you might not be able to get to your destination. But now it's minus 30 outside and it's rush hour traffic. So, and it's Christmas Eve and all these people need to get to the mall because they haven't bought all their Christmas presents yet. So you have all of this traffic.
Sounding a lot like me here.
Well, right? I know. So you've got it's cold. You don't have enough gas. You have way too much traffic on the road. You have way too many people going from their car into the mall to try to all buy one simple thing, but everybody wants it. So there's the scenario, like frustrating. You might not make it there. If you do, you're in all of this traffic where there's all this exhaust. So now it's polluting the airspace that you're in. And then you get to the mall and you might have to wait outside before you can even get in because it's so full of people. So conversely, it's July, everybody's away in Winnipeg, they're all at the lake. I get into my car, I got a full, tank of gas. I can drive there. There's no traffic on the road. I can go. There's tons of stock in the mall. I can walk. I can buy it. I can get home. So what might take hours might only, if you even get it, might only take, minutes. So just as that visual, right? Like it's all about traffic and flow.
Draw that parallel to the body.
So if we are the optimal, perfect, healthy body where there's optimal space, optimal breath, whatever needs to get anywhere, boom, it gets put in and it gets taken. And then the cell takes that. And then the waste is taken out of the body very efficiently. There's no blockage. There's no stagnancy. There's no stress. There's no need for the body to even give you a signal of pain because everything's functioning with ease.
And now if you're, I get it. So now if you're cold, like physically you are cold.
Yeah.
You have a lack of oxygen, which is the fuel for your car.
Yeah.
And you're trying to get to a destination.
Like your foot.
Deliver some nutrients to the foot.
Yeah.
But you are already cold, frozen. There's traffic, so you're blocked. That could be lipids. That could be fat buildup.
Everything. Adhesions.
Then it's going to be very challenging to get there. And it's going to be a minuscule amount compared to the amount as if you were warm, heated, less adhesions, open, have proper flow, etc.
Right.
So
circling back to the very first reason why we started this whole conversation was, okay, so we have this woman who all she did was take away things from her diet. So yes. Yes.
Add in the fats,
right.
Or protein, etc.
Yeah, but she took away something that was causing inflammation.
Yeah.
But she didn't get rid of those adhesions and she didn't, turn on that engine. She didn't fill the tank with gas.
Right.
So yes, we've made changes that have created positive change for her, but there's other things coming up because again, there's a whole bunch of parts to the equation, but the reality is the breath and the posture will always be the most crucial aspects of overall health. Because again, I think we mentioned on one of our last podcasts, if we're sitting inside your space here and you've got all of the healthiest things going on inside your home, or you've got craziness going on inside your home, if we break that window and it's -30 and we can't heat, whether good or bad, it's all going to go.
Yeah.
It's all going to become frozen and, anything alive in there is not going to survive, good or bad. So the most important thing is the container and then the ability to heat.
Mm-hmm. So I can see if anybody's either contemplating or considering the ketogenic diet or they're already into it. Now imagine, and let's say that's a good diet for you, because I'm not even saying that's like an optimal diet for me. I'm not saying it's for you, but for many people it works wonders and that's amazing. Integrating this work in, even if you can just open up the rib cage, decompress the belly and get the proper breath going, that's going to help detoxify the body and provide more oxygen and flow so that this whole new diet that you're pulling in, because your body could go through like some moments of shock. It's switching fuel sources from carbs and glycogen to now fat and ketones. But being able to, when you're shrinking the fat cells we'll call it, and losing that inflammation, but now there can be more of this toxic load being dumped into your bloodstream. You want to be able to effectively rid that from your body. And it's interesting. My brain's going in a couple different ways, because the way I understand detoxifying the body as well is trying to actually thin your blood. But if you have lots of fats, it will more so thicken the blood. That's not really the point, because the body's still brilliant in its way and will still be able to 1,000% detoxify. But the point is if you can integrate this in while you're doing it, now it's not going to go from 0 to 100. You lost all this inflammation and weight, but now, boom, this is revealing the adhesions and what was actually going underneath. And that's actually a really good thing that now at least she or anybody can see what was going on under the surface so that you can at least have more of a roadmap to make change. I didn't know underneath this layer that I had these adhesions, and this was actually the patterning of my fascia. But now being able to release, oxygenate, plump everything back up, then you can at least start to reverse that and make some positive changes. So,
and we make it simple because, again, it's not like you need to be able to be experts in reading your fascia. We make it simple because everything matters. Every part of your body matters. Everything is connected. So if you're looking at your face and you say, okay, I can understand that I've got adhesions under this cheekbone and under this jaw. I mean, just working on that alone isn't going to change anything. We need to look at the full body, and we need to simply give this container of ours the ability to become warmer. And really, I mean, there was a chapter in one of my very first books that was, it's all about tissue temperature because it's all about flow. Flow is in relation to temperature. When it's freezing, there's no flow. When it's warm, there's flow. So from that basic understanding, it's all about the flow.
It's very cool. It's very cool. This is a very cool topic because you and I aren't experts in nutrition. And
thank God.
I know.
It's a very, very wide topic. And
it is.
And because, I mean, you could say that, you know, quinoa is such a great food because of the high protein content. Yet I know a lot of people whose bodies will not handle quinoa.
Well, and it's similar to kale. Like even for kale, to some people that's a superfood. To some people it's toxic.
Right.
And like when I first heard that, I'm like, okay, somehow like I give up. You know, it gets very complicated. But
are eggs good for you? Are they not? I know. I mean, like there's so many different.
I feel like that
views.
question will never be answered because I get both sides, and I'm like, okay, I don't know what to do. But point being is, whatever you're doing, or even if there's rapid weight loss, there is ways to release those adhesions. And let's say you have sagginess of skin. That can be a lack of the collagen, correct?
Yep.
So we have to awaken those cells, that tissue back up, bring the collagen back in.
To balance. Yes.
To balance.
Allow it to migrate back.
Yeah. And oxygenating the blood is going to literally help plump your cells even more. We're inflating it and create symmetry in the body.
So yeah, and just one of the things, just from my personal perspective, because again, I'm 54, so yes, I'm aging. We all are aging, and the reality isn't that we're all going to look like we're not aging, but we can change the pattern of how we age. So years ago, we were going through a very stressful time in business, and this was also before I really started working in front of a computer a lot, because when I was in the clinic, I was working every day for hours on patients. I had my eyes closed, a candle, it was dark. So I was not in front of this computer screen. And then suddenly it's like, okay, I'm shifting from patient work to developing this thing called block therapy. And so suddenly now I'm in front of a computer, which I had never been. And also very stressful because I'm going through this crazy learning curve. I don't know anything. So you're asking others to assist. You're, in business, you look to those that know more than you. But then there was some negative relationships that came about. And I found the combination of looking at the screen and the stress caused me, like my resting face was in this like tight-lipped expression.
Yeah.
So when we frown, we're pulling the face down. When we're pursing the lips, we're creating the space that we have here and we're making it less. So now you're going to get lines in there. So one of the things I've made a priority posturally is, what is the resting expression of my face? So I've improved. My attempt is to have it be not a big grin walking around, but, to have sort of a gentle smile. Right. Because that lifts. You're using those muscles to lift, as opposed to going into that frown, which is pulling everything into this contracted, expression And I mean, there is a little bit of truth when you're a kid. Like if you keep making that funny face, that's going to be your face when you get older.
Stick with you forever.
And there is truth to that, because whatever your holding expression is, and I mean, just jokingly around, like, resting bitch face, that's a common expression, because some people just look angry when they're not angry, but they're at rest, because they're in that frown mode. If you've been in front of a computer, like, or looking at your screen and you've got, poor vision, and you're always doing this, like, you're going to eventually get those lines cemented in.
And also the mouth will start to kind of droop down a little bit. So it literally looks like you are angry.
Totally. And then that is going to be cemented by the rest of your body as well. And that's why we can't just say, okay. And it's neat, because I also have this estheticians program. So I have a lot of conversations with these estheticians about the fact that you can't just have your client come in and work on their face and expect them to look younger long term. They can come in and look refreshed in the moment, but as soon as they start moving in their patterns, whatever that pattern was that created the aging is going to still be there. So we need to really change what's going on in the body. And what we're seeing that is so very, very exciting is just by changing the dynamics of the feet, change the dynamics of the face. And if we're allowed to...
You showed me that photo.
Yeah, I'm actually going to see if we can get the approval of this person, because this is fascinating where...
This just...
Yeah.
It's hard to believe.
It is. So I won't say any more about it, because I don't know if we can use these, but if we can, we will certainly share them with you. A before and after of a face where she did nothing other than work between the toes. Like, I was like, oh my God, I wouldn't have even known it was the same person based on how everything shifted and migrated from the shape of the eyebrow to the shape of the mouth, the jaw, how
her eyes just, there's like
peace
and like intelligence and like, I don't know. It just looked sharp.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was incredible.
Alive.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, I think that really covered that topic, and I hope that answered a lot of those questions.
And I also love our tangents, because that's part of the fun. Is
totally. And it's all relevant and related.
Yeah.
But the that's our perspective on this and what you can do. So if you are doing the keto diet, if you're looking into doing the keto diet, I don't have anything negative to say about it. I say do your research, talk to either your nutritionist or whoever it is. Like, do that research first if it's a doctor, and then...
And I'm all for trying things. I mean, try stuff, see, and the thing is, see how you feel by doing it, because that's the thing. Like, I can say, wow, this diet is the best diet out there, but if you feel crappy doing it, and I mean, also knowing that detoxification can make you feel that way too, but... I mean, we all have to figure out, yes, what works for us in that feeding regard, but everybody needs to breathe, no matter what.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like if you're doing the diet and you're 2 weeks in and you're like, I feel terrible, I have no energy, this and that, like, that could just be part of, like, everything's starting to shift now. But if you've been doing this for 6 months, a couple years, and you still have, like, no energy, you feel like brain fog, not sharp, like issues are arising, then that's probably a little hint to maybe make some adjustments. But that was a lot of fun. That was really cool. And there's always, regardless of anything that you are doing or you're changing, there's always something that you can do without seeking external help. It's the breath. It's decompressing the tissue and improving flow. And it's literally as simple as that. And we have a lot of these positions on our YouTube channel. We have our sampler program, $9 for 9 videos, where we share a lot of the stuff to see if block therapy is suited for you, if it really speaks to you. We'd, of course, love for you to join, but there's a lot of other things you can do before diving in and just get that breath going.
Yeah.
Understand the posture, how we should be positioning ourselves throughout the day, start releasing adhesions, and then joining the block therapy community group in Facebook is a great place to ask questions, share ideas, hear what other people are saying, testimonials, grab some insights, motivation, and that wraps it up. I'll stop rambling. All right. Well, that was great. Thank you, Dee. And thank you for tuning in. We'll see you in next week's episode.
Bye, everyone.